Hello everyone, I'm Ron Berger and this is the Astrology News Report, an alternate view of world events as seen through the lens of Vedic astrology. Today is June 12th, 2022. This is the Special Reports section, where I take a topic or person or situation that is pertinent to world events and do an in-depth astrological analysis. This will be a special predictive report on the chart of Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, what's going on in his chart, and some predictions for where things are going for him in the near future. So first, let's take a brief tour of Putin's natal chart. As we might expect, there are some notable astrological factors in this chart that reveal what type of person he is. We'll start with the ascendant. In Vedic astrology, Putin is Libra rising. At first, this may seem like a contradiction. Isn't Libra the sign of balance and harmony, the quintessential relationship sign? Well, yes, and Libra is supposed to be willing to sacrifice for the sake of maintaining harmony and balance. Putin doesn't seem like the self-sacrificing type, does he? But there's another side of Libra, sometimes referred to as having an iron fist inside of a velvet glove. This is the sign of an idealist, and that idealism extends to social idealism. Libra is the sign of prophets and fanatics. You know who else was Libra rising? Adolf Hitler. Note that Venus, the planet that rules Libra, is situated in the ascendant in Mr. Putin's chart. A planet in its own sign strengthens the significations of the house it resides in. The first house is the house of self, of ego. In other words, this Venus is strengthening Putin's sense of self. Now, notice that directly opposite in the seventh house lies Natal Jupiter. Jupiter is the energy of enlargement, and the aspect of Jupiter encourages, enlarges what it falls on. So, a strong sense of self and an enlarged sense of self. See that Jupiter, at 26 degrees, is exactly square to the Rahu-Ketu axis. This is a pattern that signifies going to extremes. In other words, this person is not going to compromise, despite being Libra rising. Multiple planets in one sector of a natal chart put a lot of emphasis on that area of life. Note all of those planets in Putin's 12th house, the house of hidden actions. The moon is an important significator in anyone's chart. See that he has his natal moon, which happens to be the ruler of his 10th house of career and success, placed in his 8th house, the house of secrets and secret activities. Of course, it is well known that Putin's first career was as a KGB agent, and now as leader of Russia, he still keeps everyone guessing about what his real intentions are. Another signification of the 12th house is that since it is the house of the unknown, it therefore represents unknown people. The 12th house is the house of the masses, the public. The charts of successful politicians, of leaders, often have a lot of emphasis on the 12th house. See that Mr. Putin has his natal Sun, natal Saturn, natal Neptune, and natal Mercury in this sector. Sun, the planet of power, gives him power over the masses. Saturn, the planet of discipline, gives him control of the masses. Neptune, planet of dreams, helps him to delude the masses. And Mercury, planet of communication, makes him a communicator to the masses. Elsewhere in the chart, see Mars, planet of force, occupying the third house of making efforts, where it is very strong in Sagittarius, a willful, self-righteous fire sign. Up in the 10th house of public actions and career, there is Ketu, the mysterious significator of past life karma. And there it is conjunct Pluto, the planet of power, large-scale events, and complete destruction. This is a combination indicating a past life familiarity with obtaining power through surreptitious means, and the willingness to use destructive force in order to maintain one's position. So now let's look at where Putin is in his karmic timeline, according to the Vimshatari Dasha, the planetary period system. Turns out, he is coming to a critical point later this year. Putin will soon go into a new major period. In November, he begins his Mercury Major Period. But right now, he has to finish out his Saturn Major Period, which still has several months yet to go. Saturn is a beneficial planet for Libra rising charts. Due to its rulership of two of the good houses, the 4th and the 5th, Saturn becomes a Yoga Karaka planet for Libra ascendant. This shows up in Putin's 12th house as his success with controlling the masses of Russia for nearly 2 decades. The benefits of the ruler of his 4th and 5th house have made him, until recently, very popular. During 2022, Putin is also finishing up the sub-period of Jupiter. Despite being categorized as a benefic planet, Jupiter is not particularly beneficial for Libra rising. This is because of the houses that Jupiter rules in a Libra chart, the 3rd and the 6th. The 3rd house signifies personal desires and making efforts, and in this chart is well fortified with Mars, planet of aggression. The 3rd house also signifies neighbors, which for the chart of a leader can be expanded to neighboring countries. So, we see how the Jupiter sub-period has prompted Putin to act on his desires to make Ukraine part of Russia again. The 6th house is the house of struggle and difficulty. Famously, the 6th is the house of disease. Note that Jupiter represents the energy of enlargement, in other words, swellings and tumors. See that Jupiter, ruler of his 6th house, resides in Putin's 7th house. In the physical body, the 7th house is the pelvic area, specifically the genitals. Further, it is well known that in Vedic astrology's planetary period system, the period of a retrograde planet has a higher potential to create ill health. So, this is beginning to look like Mr. Putin might have prostate cancer. And from recent photos, he doesn't look so good, does he? Another thing about his Jupiter sub-period, Jupiter is a multiplier planet. The 6th house is the house of enemies. The 7th house is the house of the direct opponent. So this combination, activated at this time in his life, shows that he has run into a lot of direct opposition due to his 3rd house efforts. This, of course, has already manifested as the world response to his invasion of Ukraine. Now let's take a look at how the current transiting planets are affecting Putin's chart. We'll start out with Saturn, which is now retrograde at the very beginning of Aquarius and will shortly be returning to Capricorn in early July. When a planet leaves a sign and subsequently retrogrades back into it, its purpose is to finish off whatever got started before it left the sign previously. Capricorn is Putin's fourth house, the house of the heart, the house of self-satisfaction. He's still in a Saturn Major Period, so this sector is strongly activated. Retrograde Saturn transiting back into his fourth house will make him more stubborn and determined to finish what he started in Ukraine. Retro Saturn will be exactly conjunct Putin's natal Rahu in late August. This is not usually a good transit. It's the planet of harsh realities, afflicting his natal significator of ambition. Jupiter is now transiting in Pisces, Putin's sixth house of struggle and difficulties, enemies, and disease. As the planet of expansion, Jupiter's transit in this sector can multiply your problems and increase your enemies. Since this is Jupiter's sign, and Putin is still in a Jupiter sub-period, this sector is activated. Therefore, a transit here is more likely to produce results. But note, there is a potential upside to this transit. Since it is the planet of wisdom, Jupiter, in its own sign, in the sixth house, can help solve your problems, especially through conciliation. Rahu and Ketu changed signs back in mid-March. Rahu is now in sidereal Aries, Putin's seventh house. Ketu is now in sidereal Libra, his first house. Ketu is the energy of the past, and since it represents the unseen dimension, it is generally unfavorable for the material plane. The first house is a general indicator of the body and therefore health. He's already in a sub-period that activates his sixth house of health and disease, and now, with Ketu transiting in his first house, the potential for bad health increases. Also, Ketu is a general indicator of sacrifice and surrender. So this is not a favorable transit for accomplishing your desires. Meanwhile, Rahu, transiting in the seventh house, puts extra emphasis on seventh house matters, and even more so since the sub-period ruler Jupiter is situated here. Rahu is the significator of foreigners, here in his seventh house of the direct opponent. And now we come to a particularly nasty transit, which starts forming in a couple of weeks. On June 26th, Mars moves into Aries, where it joins up with Rahu and Uranus, already transiting in this sign. The exact conjunction happens in the last days of July and first days of August. It's a triple malefic combo, sure to manifest as something dramatic in world events. If a person has a significant planet in their own chart at or around 24 degrees Aries, they will have some personal events to contend with. And what do you know? Putin has his natal Jupiter posited at 26 degrees Aries, right in the path of this frightful planetary formation. Hard to say exactly what the event or events will be, but for sure it will be dramatic and it won't be pleasant. Mars adds energy to whatever part of the chart it transits through, and since the seventh house is the house of the direct opponent, it's his enemy that gains the power. So this looks bad for Mr. Putin, since this combo also opposes his ascendant and afflicts his 6th house ruler Jupiter, it could have effects on his health and well-being of the would-be emperor. Well, it will be interesting to see what happens. I'll be posting an update on this as we get closer next month. Next week, we'll take a look at Mars transiting in Aries and the effects for each sign. So, until then.